Hey folks, it's Alex Blencar and I'm back at the kitchen table. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about whether or not it's better to move in the spring or the winter. Specifically, whether or not it is better to sell in the winter or the spring. Let's talk about it. So, in order to answer this question, we first need to define spring and winter. So, what I classified as winter was the months of November, December, January, and February. And then what I classified as spring would be March, April, May, and June. So, a 4-month period of the year that I classified as winter and spring. And I took a bit of an empirical approach to the answer of this question, and the answer to the question really is going to come down to your situation, but hopefully this can help you come to a decision as to whether or not you should wait until spring or you should move this winter. So in order to answer this question, I analyzed the past 5 years in residential real estate in the city of Peterborough. And what I did was I looked at 3 factors to determine whether or not it's best to sell your home in either of these seasons. The first factor was how long homes took to sell. So what was the average days on the market and how long did it take for those homes to sell? The next thing was looking at the average price. So how did the average price change over the last 5 years in these 2 different seasons? Are we getting more money for our home if we sell in the winter? Or are we getting more money for our home on average if we sold in the spring? And finally, I looked at the absorption rate. So this is the ratio between new listings and the number of sales for the month. So this kind of tells us how likely it is that your home will sell, because what we're going to look at is how many homes sold versus how many homes were listed. So obviously, if there were more homes listed than sold, we're going to have a lower absorption rate and vice versa. So if more homes sold than were listed, then we would have a higher absorption rate. So let's break down how these 3 factors looked over the last 5 years in Peterborough residential real estate to determine which season is the best to sell. So a quick disclaimer before we get into the analysis. It's really impossible to time the market. These are kind of some basic statistics that can maybe help you come to a decision if you're really an analytical person and you really want to know, am I going to stay on market longer if I wait to the spring versus if I put it on market right now? How likely is my home to sell if I put it on the market now versus if I waited until spring? And, am I going to get more money if I wait until spring? So again, they're all averages. This isn't an exact formula, but hopefully it can help you guys come to a decision when you're really deciding whether or not to wait until spring to sell your home. So here are the results. Let's look first at the days to sell. So the average amount of days to sell over the last 5 years in that spring period, March to June, was 19.75 days. Whereas when we compare that to the winter, it takes a little bit longer. So when we look at the months of November to February over the last 5 years, it took on average 23 days to sell. So it's not a huge change, and that kind of seems to be consistent throughout all of these metrics, whether you sell in the spring versus the winter. On average, it's going to sell a little bit faster in the spring, but really it's not a huge leap. You're not selling a week faster. You're only selling a couple of days faster. Next, let's look at the average price. So for the spring in the last 5 years, it was $496,360.75. That is the average price of a home that sold in the last 5 years in that spring period. Now, if we compare that to the last 5 years in winter, we saw an average price of $496,359.90. That is absolutely crazy. There was only about an 85-cent difference between whether you sold in the winter versus the spring. Now, yes, the spring does get you that extra 85 cents on average, but again, it's really negligible whether you're going to sell in the spring versus the winter. On average, over the last 5 years, you're really getting almost the exact same price for that average price for a residential home in Peterborough in the months of November to February versus the months of March to June, or the spring season. But again, spring does take the cake here, but it's really not by a lot, 85 cents if you can believe it. Finally, we're going to look at the absorption rate. This is the ratio of homes that are listed versus the ratio of homes that are sold. In a perfect world, we've got an absorption rate of 1, so every single home that's listed gets sold. So let's see how it looks for spring versus winter. So the average absorption rate for spring over the last 5 years was 0.85, whereas the average absorption rate for winter over the last 5 years was 0.97. So this one is really a big jump. Again, we're not seeing as many listings in the winter, so that absorption rate is a little bit higher. We're seeing the ratio between sales and new listings, it's a little bit higher. So 97% of the homes that are listed end up selling in the winter versus 85% that end up selling in the spring. Again, this is just an average, but that's how the numbers worked out over the last 5 years for a residential home in the city of Peterborough. So now we're going to talk about some other factors that might go into your move. Again, it completely depends on your situation, and I would love to get together with you to talk about whether it's right to wait until spring to move or to get your home ready for sale and listed in this next coming winter. Now, some factors that you might need to consider. You are going to have to move in the winter. So whether or not you want to move in the winter or wait until the snow's gone, in Ontario, unfortunately, we suffer from a lot of snow in those winter months, especially, it's a little bit colder at the end of January and the start of February. So you're going to have to, rent a moving truck or rent a storage container to keep all of your belongings in while you're moving. And that could maybe be, less than desirable in those winter months when it's cold and snowy. The next thing to mention would be the amount of listings in the spring versus winter. So as I discussed, there are a lower amount of listings in those winter months. So yes, your home is more likely to sell, but it might be harder to find a home because there's a lower amount of listings and a higher amount of sales. So maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult to buy a home, but it might be easier to sell your home. So again, this is when we could do the sale of your home is conditional on you finding a place, which is becoming, more and more common in this, shifting market that we're in. And finally, another factor to consider is the rising of interest rates. I made a video about it a little bit earlier this week, but every 0.25% raise in interest rates, we see a $22,000 decline in the average price in the city of Peterborough. So as those interest rates are going up, the value of your home continues to go down. And obviously this is the plan with raising the interest rates and helping to cool the housing market. But, if you're really looking to get the most amount of money for your home and you're comfortable moving in the winter, honestly, it might be best to sell as soon as you can. Who knows what the market is going to look like in spring? We have seen, I think, around 160,000 or more decline in the average price for a residential home since the peak in February. So prices are dropping as those interest rates are going up. And, there's word on the street that the interest rates are going to continue to go up. And in theory, if we continue to see history repeat itself, the prices are going to keep going down. Now, which one is the winner? Well, if we look at, the metrics, it was 2 out of 3 for spring, but really, honestly, you could say it was a tie. Spring won days on market. It was really a tie for average price, and then winter won the absorption rate. So again, it completely depends on your situation. I'd love to get together with you and talk about whether or not it is right for you to move in the winter or to wait until spring. So if you want to reach out, please feel free. My number will be down below as well as my email address. Feel free to shoot me a text, give me a call or an email at any time. I'd love to discuss a housing plan with you. So that's all for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helped you come to a decision about whether or not winter or spring is better for you. I'm Alex Blencarn. This is The Kitchen Table. Until next time, guys, take care.